Obviously, I think we're a very big advocate of LinkedIn, and many of you are members of our LinkedIn group. So we are excited for Chris to, come and be able to, share a little bit of his knowledge. I'm a big believer that LinkedIn is kind of the future of how people do business and connect and learn things. We've done our own internal surveys of our members and our readers, and found that, depending on the type of professional that they are, that they're getting their industry news and updates anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 times as much from LinkedIn than they are traditional trade magazines. So as a publication ourselves, we have our own publications, so that's good news and bad news. But since we have a very large LinkedIn presence, it's very positive. And I think that one of the reasons why we were really fortunate to have LinkedIn come is to really share with people how to maximize LinkedIn, because I think a lot of people don't understand how to really do the best practices and maximize their own profiles or connect with people. And so I know that now we're going to kind of move on to more of an informal fireside chat with Chris.
Unfortunately, we don't have a fireside set up here, but it's still going to work. So what I wanted to do was kind of dive a little bit deeper into Jonathan and his background, his business, and how he's leveraged LinkedIn. So I guess the first question is, 01 to 07, with your time at Optimed, you were the VP of Sales and Marketing. So what was your business model like back then, and what were your challenges?
Our business model back then, I think, was really traditional. It was mainly picking up the phone and cold calling, and pounding the phones on a constant basis, and trying to find and identify who that right individual was at the company. And it was even, I would say, it was a little even harder than it is today to go on the internet and find people, even if you were to Google them and go to their website. So it was very challenging, and we just had to use traditional approaches, and it took a very long time to find out who you actually wanted to talk to, and who they even were, or if they even existed. And I think that's one of the things that LinkedIn has really changed out there.
So with your business and scaling your business back then, what would you think were the biggest challenges in scaling a business like that?
I think it took a significant amount more of resources and time, more staff, tremendous amount more of cold calling and emails, constantly trying to get to the right person. And I would say it took a lot longer to close sales and do business and build partnerships than it did today. I look at what I remember my first 6 months at my company, and spending from 9 a.m. to like midnight for 6 months, just picking up the phone and calling, and also I think trying to get email addresses. So one of the things is you can go ahead and call, and maybe you get their voicemail or something like that. Now you've got the second challenge once you found that person is, how do I contact them? Where if you look at LinkedIn, you have two options. Is obviously you've got the in-mail function, but you're only limited to a certain number of in-mails. But with LinkedIn, at least, you have the ability, if you're connected to them or you know them, then to be able to send them an individual message. Or if they're in a group that you're in, then you can send them an individual message. So that's a little bit of a game changer in how easy it is to kind of identify and connect with people. I don't think people probably appreciate it as much as how it's really changed how you do sales, or it's not just sales, but just building relationships and connecting with people.
Right. So with regards to, obviously you had new products, you had new offerings, you had new information you wanted to share out there. I have to assume that it was quite difficult doing that at scale back before social media and really the revolution of technology.
It was to keep organizations updated on what's new. I think you had, traditional, where maybe you would send them, something in the mail or a printed brochure, or you'd have them, part of a newsletter or email list that you would go ahead and send off to people on a monthly basis. And I think that things have really changed, especially with social media, you know, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and how you can update people on what's going on. Because in the past, I mean, how did we really do it? Outside of email or like a hard copy newsletter that a company would send out, is maybe we'd have a section on our website that would be about us. But the reality is, we know, is how many people are coming to a company's website to learn what's new. So I think it's really neat how social media has really changed that, and people engaging and following what's going on with your company.
So now I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question, because I mentioned in my talk that had I had LinkedIn back in 1997 through, call it 2005, my business would have been different. I would have been more successful in my business. Do you think your time at Optomed would have changed drastically with the use of LinkedIn?
I definitely think it would have, because it would have, I think that tail of how long it takes to secure a piece of business would have been much, much shorter. And I also think one of the fascinating things that we really use LinkedIn for too is finding someone that maybe you didn't even know existed. Meaning you didn't know that person existed, that title existed, that company existed. But you're searching for something, and then it pops up and you're like, oh, that's who I was looking for at that specific company with that title. And the speed that it can allow you to do, meaning, and you know, if I'm looking for an employer, and we, by the way, we use LinkedIn, and I would say in all aspects of our business. So whether it's, you know, certification, education, training, you know, or even sponsorship or attendance at the conferences, you could go ahead and say, hey, you know, I'm looking for, you know, a national employer in Atlanta who's an expert on corporate wellness. You know, we, in the past, you know, could have spent weeks, you know, calling people we know, searching on the internet for it. But now, you know, it's much easier to know, okay, well, you know, Coca-Cola's in Atlanta, you know, and you instead of Googling, you go into LinkedIn and find their benefits manager. So it's really has sped up the process, and I know that in probably would be much further along had I had that.
Right. So let's talk about your role at the Medical Tourism Association. LinkedIn was 4 years old when you started this initiative. How did this enhance your business from the get-go as opposed to your time at Optomed? So just starting out with the Medical Tourism Association.
With both the Medical Tourism Association and the Employer Healthcare and Benefits Congress, you know, it's definitely had a very large impact. You know, one thing that I think our organization has done that other organizations haven't, or they haven't really picked up on it, is, you know, we decided that we weren't going to create a group or a presence that was focused on our company. Like, come follow us as the Employer Healthcare and Benefits Congress, or come follow us as the MTA. What we looked at is, what are the core interests and the most growing trends of the professionals in the industry where we can help lead that conversation? And so what we ended up doing is creating very specific groups where people who have that same interest and passion can share it within that group. And so we've ended up creating about 30 groups on LinkedIn in all these niche categories, from corporate wellness to healthcare reform to voluntary benefits, self-funding, medical tourism, M-Health, one for just HR professionals. And what we found is, and this is similar to how the event has really built out, is, you know, people have a passion. You know, they're involved in multiple categories in their sector, meaning if I'm an employer or a benefits or HR manager, I'm probably dealing with health insurance and healthcare reform and corporate wellness and self-funding and voluntary benefits and many other things, but I have one passion, and I'm going to engage in that passion. And we wanted to have very focused groups that would allow people to collaborate, discuss, and even debate what's going on in that area that they have their specific passion in. And with that, I think, you know, we've had amazing success. You know, we're at this conference, you know, we hit 500,000 members in our 30 different groups. And I think the neatest thing about it is the focused opportunity for people to discuss and have conversations. You know, where if you have a general group, it can be very difficult because everyone's trying to post things. And obviously, I think there are challenges too in having a group in social media, because you will get a lot of people who don't understand, for example, that LinkedIn is a professional network. And that it's really meant for discussion, or I mean, and LinkedIn could have a different view. Our view of our groups is it's a professional group to share ideas, collaborate, and debate, and it's not there for people to promote their products or services, or just to post stuff to drive people to their own blog or Twitter account. And so we really focus on trying to keep that conversation very focused and encourage it. And what we've actually found, which is really cool, is we'll see stuff, for example, in our healthcare reform group that's posted in there, something the moment it happens, and then people start debating it, that 2 to 3 days later is on CNN or Fox News. And you realize that it's hitting that group in social media before anything else. And I think that's really powerful. And I think another really powerful area, for LinkedIn is that engagement of where you have one person and they look at one of their peers or colleagues in LinkedIn and they look at what groups are they in, and then they decide to start following those groups, and that's a way it creates a stickiness in people coming to you, and I think it's really had a positive effect on the speakers we've had, the attendance at the conference. And people engaging with us, because we do a lot of white papers and educational webcasts during the year, and what we found is we're having amazing success pushing them out through LinkedIn. We did one about a month ago for gift card partners. It was a corporate wellness white paper. It was on employers using gift cards to incentivize their employees. And we got 1,000 people who downloaded that white paper the first week, and we found that a lot of those people weren't in their database, and that's because they came from LinkedIn. And I think that's really, really powerful. And one question I have for you, Chris, I know you created many of the questions for me, but I have one for you, is today, do you know how many groups there are and how many groups are created each week or each year with LinkedIn? Because I think that's an important issue with people understanding how do they engage in LinkedIn.
With regards to LinkedIn's groups, I believe the number is over 2 million. Groups on LinkedIn. Now, as an individual, you can create a group, companies create groups, people inside of organizations creating groups to get their message across to the people that they care about. When you talk about creating a group and utilizing that group, like you mentioned, not pushing people to their specific Twitter or blog or anything like that inside of your groups, individuals want to do that. They want to create and put the direction to their choosing. I work with a lot of financial advisors and financial advisory firms that create groups that are specific to those individuals. Actually, there's a guy in Massachusetts, and he's a South African expat, and he started a South African expat group of people in Boston. He now has 350 people that he didn't have access to before to deliver his message about what he does and how he can bring value to them on LinkedIn. Now, as far as, what was the other question you had? Number of groups? I don't really know how many are being created on a weekly or a monthly basis. I just know with 2.2 people joining every single second, 173,000 people joining every month, you have to believe that people are engaging in creating new groups. So it's about ensuring that when you do create a group, that you have a specific reason for creating that group and getting your message across, for collaboration and discussion, and obviously debate is a healthy reason as well. So, in kind of responding to your question with a question, social media has obviously made things a little bit easier for your organization, but what are the challenges of now having social media as part of your process and a part of your company brand? Do you see any new business challenges?
There's definitely business challenges, and one I would say is time, meaning that you could get lost in just managing, moderating, engaging, posting content in your groups. That's one of the biggest challenges, and it's just it's all social media. You could spend all day on Twitter, you could spend all day on Facebook, you could spend all day on LinkedIn. We focused more on LinkedIn from the B2B side. where we see Facebook more B2C, and Twitter a little bit more personal, and in some business. I think moderating a group, can take a lot of effort too. There's a lot of groups out there that don't moderate, and then they lose the focus of the people in their group, or they let a lot of spam, posted. And once you lose your group to spam and sales and anyone posting anything, then you lose, I think, permanently, people paying attention to that message. So the moderating can be tough because you have to, really identify on a daily basis what is really news and discussion worthy, what's promotion, what's spam. And then when you multiply that over 30 groups and 500,000 people, it becomes a lot. That's a challenge. And also, I think what's neat is I love the debate that happens in our LinkedIn groups. And for some of you who you might be in our healthcare reform group, which has almost 30,000 members, sometimes it gets pretty heated in there. People get very emotional about it and passionate. And sometimes it goes too far. And we've had where people get nasty and they say negative things in there. And then sometimes the conversation goes outside of the group to individual messaging in LinkedIn, and then we're called in as the police. And I would say every month or two this comes off, often we get a message saying, hey, you're running this group, this long debate happened, and now this person is individually messaging me and saying inappropriate things to me. And I won't say what those inappropriate things are, but sometimes they're really off the wall. And then, and then you have to, think of how you react as a company to that and how you deal with it and respond to it in a way that's professional but balances people's, individual freedoms and things like that. So, that has been a challenge in understanding how we allocate our resources to social media, the time that we give to it. And I would say another area that we're constantly always innovative, changing, and adapting. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we engage with our members as they join our groups, because as we've gotten bigger, we now have thousands of professionals joining our groups each week. So what is the message we can deliver to them as they join the group? Because for those of you who aren't aware, when someone goes to request to join a group, you get to send a message when they first request, and then once they join, they get another message. So it's what do we want to educate that person on, or how do we want to engage in them? Is it telling an HR person you can get a free pass to come to our annual conference? Is it inviting them onto webcasts or joining the association? Is it just finding out about who they are and what their interest is? And that last one, that's almost like a puzzle, because if you have thousands of people coming into your group each week, how do you individually engage with each one of them and find out what their interest is? I think that a challenge outside of us, but for other companies, is to look at how are they engaging on LinkedIn. Because I think some people follow the philosophy of creating a company page and updating, and I think it's great to have a company page and update. I think some people get lost in their company pages and how people are following them, and they assume that their customers are every day going to their company page to find out what's going on, and I think we know that's not true unless you have a really loyal and passionate customer. So we have our company pages, and then we have our groups, and I just personally love the groups because you get more engagement and discussion. But along with that, I'm seeing some companies that they'll create a group in their own company name, and they really don't think about how a group affects their brand. And what I mean by that is I had a conversation with a member of our association probably about a month or two ago with their marketing department, where they said we have a group on LinkedIn and we're engaging our the people that are in our group, and we're really successful at doing it. And this is a big company, and while I was on the call with them, I went to their group and I saw that they created it over a year ago, and they only had 18 members in their group, and half of them were their own internal employees. And I think the disconnect that they didn't see is, I think to social media, you can have a positive effect and the opposite effect. And I think, potential clients or existing clients might go and do the same thing I just did without knowing who that company is and say they only have 18 people in their group. Maybe they're not a successful company, or maybe they're not popular, or they're not a leader. But they had a great company page. So they were focusing on their company page, but not on the group. And I think there was a disconnect between the C-suite and marketing as to what was successful in engagement, because knowing who this company is, they could easily have hundreds or thousands of people within their group. So you really have to understand how to manage your brand and how it's going to be perceived. And then it comes down to that other question. And our philosophy is creating it in people's niches, where I think others say let's create it within our group. But if you create a group that's based upon your company, the question you have to ask yourself is this a topic that people are going to come and engage in on a daily basis? And what is the content of the group? And I think the third challenge that we have, that everyone else will have, is how do you create, what content do you post? And how do you be seen as a thought leader? That's not easy either.
So you talk about time and time management with 500,000 members in your 30 plus groups. How do you manage your time? How much time do you spend on LinkedIn personally?
I have a very good social media team, and they're young, and I think they're starting to lose their hair and it's turning gray. I obviously spent a very large portion of my time in the past on LinkedIn. And now I have a great social media team. And what I do is we kind of collaborate now, and we keep expanding that social media team, and we really have a great staff. So I would say I used to probably spend anywhere from 50 to 75% of my time on LinkedIn. Even so much that Renee would come into my office and say, every time I come in my office, you're on LinkedIn. And I would say, no, it just happens that when you come in my office, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on here 100% of the day. But I think that, as a professional, if you really delve into, and I know LinkedIn does training and things like that, but how you can find people the most effectively and how to engage, you learn it's very effective. In fact, my colleague, Barak Hershowitz with the International Luxury Hotel Association, which is integrated within our event and they have 200,000 members, he got to tell you how LinkedIn is being so disruptive to traditional advertising, meaning print. He had one of the largest conferences in the hotel industry a couple months ago reach out to them and say, listen, we used to advertise all the time in print magazines and on the radio and TV for our international conference. And we've done all our research, and we now know that print media is somewhat dead, and there's not an effective return on investment anymore. And we've looked at where we should spend our money. We've identified it's social media, and within that, we've identified we're a B2B event, and therefore LinkedIn is the only appropriate source. And we've come to you, who runs the biggest group on LinkedIn for hotels, to look at how we can really engage the industry in regards to our events. And I think that is what is really disruptive about it is, I think that you're going to see traditional media, the print, slowly disappear in our industries. Everyone's going digital. So you've got the digital magazines, you can have your apps for iPad, but a lot of people are gathering that information through LinkedIn today. And I know the biggest challenge that companies have, and that we all face, is we're in this digital world where everyone is overwhelmed. We've got our own personal issues and our personal lives we're dealing with. Then we have our business lives. Our phones are hooked up to our email that we get all the time. We're on Facebook, so we're getting emails all the time, Facebook Business Pleasure, and we're swamped. And we don't necessarily have time for to pick up a trade magazine anymore, or sometimes even to go to a conference. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of what I call white noise today. That's interfering with a company getting their message. A lot of feedback I get too is it's impossible to do cold calls anymore. So you want to reach out to someone, whether to create a partnership or to tell them about your product or service, and they don't listen. They don't answer the phone, and emailing them doesn't even work anymore. So how do you get your message across? And I think we're starting to see a shift of people saying, well, let's be a thought leader. Although I think that term is really misused in the industry, because what we're seeing a lot, especially in the insurance and benefits world, is a company produces a white paper or a document that totally sells their product or service, They push it out and they say, we did it, we're a thought leader, we've produced this this piece of information. And I think what people are looking to now is to not be sold to and to be educated, and then to look at who is educating them, who is that thought leader that they might want to engage with. And I think that LinkedIn is really that premier platform, because how else can you do that? Write something that people follow and engage with, and then allow yourself the opportunity to connect because you've engaged with them online.
Right. So with regards to LinkedIn and what it's done for your business, success-wise, can you quantify where you would have been without LinkedIn as opposed to now with LinkedIn?
And before I answer that, I want to give one disclosure. This isn't a paid endorsement, and I'm not on their salary, but I'm just very passionate about LinkedIn. I think it would be we'd be in a totally different place if if LinkedIn, wasn't there for us. To quantify it, it's very difficult to quantify, but I know that, we now are, in the U.S. and and also the world, the biggest, benefits and insurance and healthcare conference in our sectors. In every aspect it has helped us, with whether it's the certification programs, whether it's education, engagement. When we've done road shows or regional event, that participation, is amazing. And one thing too is sometimes, because we're in so many different very niches, and we know, and I know so many people that, I've gotten to be friends with and colleagues over the year. It's also very difficult when you're doing a specific initiative to think immediately of who you're dealing with. We just did a big conference in Asia, and a lot of our speakers came through LinkedIn. And what I mean by that, they're people that I know that I was connected with or in our groups, but that's how I really focused my search on finding those right individuals. So, I don't know how to quantify it. I mean, I would probably say we'd be 50% of where we are today, but I think the most exciting part for us is where we're headed in the future. We look at over the next 12 to 24 months, the engagement in our white papers, our webcasts, our CE, our roadshows is potentially going to double or triple. And I would say that's heavily because of our LinkedIn groups and engagement. And I think our conference is going to dynamically change, because our goal is, for HR and benefit managers to start giving them free passes and engage them the moment they come into our groups. And then through some of our partnerships and everything, now that we have 500,000 members, we've been so busy over this past year looking at how do we just manage the group, how do we moderate it and handle it. And now it's going to be about really honing in and engaging each type of professional within the group and getting them out to participate in the show or connect with our members. And with that, if you have any secrets, please feel free to share that. But I'm just really excited, and seeing the people come in, it's, you realize you have an opportunity too. And I think as a company and as an association, we almost have I feel like a moral obligation as a leader in the sector in social media that we can help grow this industry. Meaning if we can empower and educate HR people coming into our group how to be really successful at corporate wellness, or comply with healthcare reform, or how to implement medical tourism right, then they're going to go do it at their company, and that's going to grow the industry. But when they do it right, they're then going to share in their local community what they're doing. So I think from that kind of spider web effect, we can have a much bigger impact in our industry. And I know we're going to roll out chapters of our association, in different cities around the country. On the international side, we're already doing that and help facilitate that and help those chapters through the social media presence. Well,
I'm certainly one of social responsibility and moral responsibility. Certainly I'm in sales, but it's about educating people about LinkedIn, because the more they know about the platform and how to best use it, the better the ecosystem will be. There'll be less spamming of information across into groups. And in talking about LinkedIn, and certainly you've built a great following and certainly a great organization leveraging LinkedIn. Talk about a little bit about your personal brand and how you're viewed on LinkedIn and where you think it can go from here.
I'll be honest, I don't know how I'm viewed on LinkedIn. It would be great to get feedback from everyone to share their thought. I'm sure everyone who's in our groups, I was like, hey, I know that guy, because they see my picture everywhere. I think for any individual, whether it's me or anyone here, I think it definitely helps your professional brand, because whether you're in a group with someone and it's really cool. Like, someone could post something that you don't even know, and you respond, and you get into a little discussion on LinkedIn, and then all of a sudden you guys know each other, and there's a bond. And maybe for purpose of this, we'll call it the LinkedIn bond. And it's very odd, because it's almost like you're friends, where I've been traveling somewhere and someone's like, oh, we were in that discussion on LinkedIn, or you've connected with someone and now you're a connection, and they'll say, oh, hey, Jonathan, we're connected on LinkedIn, and it's almost like you're a friend. And there's more of a personal relationship, and a lot of the barriers and rigidity of not necessarily knowing someone fully when you first meet them are gone. So I think it's definitely helped, and obviously being able to have your name out there in your face and engaging with people makes you more well known than not. It's a balancing act, though, of what you're posting, because it can have the opposite effect. Everybody could know you, but say, hey, I don't want to engage with that guy, or I don't like what he's saying. And the one thing that we'd like to see more of is, whether it's members of our association or people here, them wanting to get more engaged even with our groups. What amazes me is we don't have people in our groups who ever come to us and say, hey, I want to help the group grow and create a subgroup on a specific topic, or hey, I'd like to help be a moderator, or hey, we'd like to start seeing you post more content in this specific area, or you're missing this thing, or I want to share this thing. And what's very fascinating too is, I don't think people should be afraid of what they post on LinkedIn if they think it's important. I've had professionals who are in the insurance industry for 30 years, and they send me a message, and they say, I'd like to ask this question on LinkedIn in your group, and let's say it's healthcare reform, but I'm afraid to ask it. Do you mind posting it for me? And I've done it, and and then afterwards everyone answers in the group, and that's what's cool, is instantly you get all these experts from around the country or world to answer, and then he sends a message, thank you so much for asking a question and getting me the answers. And but I responded, I said, listen, you can post this, there's nothing you should be embarrassed about. But I think some people are afraid, and they're more passive users, where they watch what people post, and they're afraid to post things or reply to discussions. And I think one of the key things for LinkedIn that anyone here is to focus on creating a discussion in the group, and not focus on posting something just to drive someone to your Twitter feed or your Facebook page or something on your website, because you're going to get very little traffic that way. But if you can get people to engage in a discussion, and meaning, instead of sending them a posting, hey, here's a great story from New York Times on a link, actually writing up why you think it's a good story of what it's being covered in the New York Times, and post that in there, because if you just put a link in, you're not going to get people really discussing things. And if they're not discussing it, they're not really seeing your name attached to it. And I think you're losing some of that personal brand, some of that thought leadership, and people really wanting to connect in with you.
All right, so now I have a different kind of question, and it's more about credibility. Certainly LinkedIn, you can go into a group of yours and see that there's 30,000 members or 50,000 members. Do you think having that visibility gives your organization more credibility, as opposed to you just telling people that you have 500,000 members in a private group, maybe not on LinkedIn if that wasn't in the picture? So you think that provides more credibility for your organization?
Oh, I definitely do. I think in whether you're an association, you have a magazine, or you have a conference, I think there's a real lack of transparency out there. So I think this is really a great question that Chris asked. And what I mean by lack of transparency is, there's a lot of companies out there that they have to hit their numbers. And so they'll stretch how many readers they have of their magazine. They'll stretch the audience of their magazine or their email lists. And we see that all the time in the insurance sector. Or they'll, there's one in our space. There's one very big benefits magazine that all the advertisers think that they have large employers who read it when they actually just have small groups. But all these companies are advertising in it. And there's a lot of games in the media space now that are played where it's they're playing with the numbers to try to boost their subscription. Whether it's they say, well, the pass-through readership and 5 to 10 people in the office read the magazine. So when you look at the distribution of a magazine, it'll say it's 150,000 readers, but when you break it down, it comes down to like 30,000 or 20,000, and it's decreasing because print media is decreasing. You can't increase print subscription anymore. So anyone who has a print publication where it shows their numbers are going up, I'm kind of suspect about that. And when it comes to LinkedIn, there's a transparency that I haven't seen anywhere else. Meaning you can go to a group and look at the size of the group. And I'm also a believer, I don't always say that I'm absolutely correct, and I make mistakes, and you make mistakes, you learn from it. But you'll have a magazine or a publication or organization who says, we reach 80,000 employers. And then you peel back, I peel back the onion, and I'll even go, how I vet people is actually LinkedIn. It's maybe not the best way, but I still do it. I go and I look, well, how many people do you have in your group? And then you look, well, they have 20 employee members in they're in this group focused on employers on LinkedIn. And I go, okay, now I know you don't have 80,000 people who are getting your email list each day. But with our groups, it's very transparent. You can go and see we've got 30,000 in healthcare reform, or 200,000 in HR, or almost 29,000 benefits and health and welfare professionals, or 6,000 in medical tourism. So you know how many people they reach. And I think that's what's really cool. Now on the connection side, something to think about too is people do vet people based upon how many connections you have. So if, obviously once you get over 500, it's a little more difficult because it just says 500 plus. But when I'm interviewing people, even for sales or marketing in my own organization, and they don't have a LinkedIn profile, that tells me, there's something not right. They don't have a picture attached, I say, that makes me a little nervous. But if they have very little LinkedIn connections, that tells me that maybe they weren't using that platform to really engage, and I kind of measure that. And I do the same thing with professionals that I'm dealing with, is I'll go on and look at how many connections do they have. Is it small or is it a lot? And to me, that determines what is their influence. Not just their influence, because it's not just them about going to connect with people. It's about people, if they're an influencer, people are going to request to connect in with them that they know. So I know that, if they have that 500 plus, that they are an influencer and they're someone important. And then there's I think a different side to that is if you have people who are top CEOs at major organizations, some of them will have a social media guy that's doing it, but some of them don't do it at all because they're too important and they don't have time for social media. But I think with LinkedIn, you guys should, be looking at that, is looking at the group. Now you've got to click on the little I button in the group profile and kind of see that size, and there's just a transparency there that you can't get anywhere else.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question, and that would be what advice would you give somebody already entrenched in their current business or starting a new business, and how to leverage LinkedIn best, either to expand existing business or to launch a new business?
I think there's a couple different ways you can do that. One would be to go and try to find some mentors, people on LinkedIn that look like they're doing it really right, and say, hey, can you give me advice, whether it's how I should connect with people, how I should message people, what I should do with my profile. I think there's a lot of area of improvement people can do with their profile. I update my profile a lot, but I think that there's probably still a lot of work. And LinkedIn is always updating itself. So you really have to stay on top of it, going and looking at some of the amazing, rock stars on LinkedIn and what they've done. And then I think the other part of it is, LinkedIn provides, services, whether it's training or special services to help you do that. But what I think is important is not to be passive about it. You need to, whether you're going out to a colleague, a peer, a rock star, or LinkedIn, I think you need to engage, even if you think you're doing it awesome, because I do that. Hey, I ask people, what do you think I could be doing differently, whether it's something I'm posting or the message I'm sending out or what my profile looks like. And I've also started doing where we'll change up the messages we're sending to people. So if I'm trying to reach out to people for something very specific, I'll write it up a couple different ways as I send it out to see which one gets the best response. Because it's difficult to get people's attention, and times are changing, and you constantly have to stay up on how do you engage people. So two other pieces of advice is focus on what you're writing, and I would also say if you're individually messaging people, don't necessarily spam them. And know who you're actually sending a message to, because we get, whether it's myself or colleagues I know, they'll get messages from people where you can tell the people never even looked at your corporate profile or what you did, and they just sent you, a message without thought. And when you do that, you've lost that person to ever pay attention to you again.
Great. So we have about 5 minutes. Maybe we could take some questions from the audience if there are any. There we go.
So the question was, for those who didn't hear, how much time should you spend on LinkedIn with your business, whether it's existing or new, or you're launching a new product? I think the first question is, what are your resources and time? Because if you don't have the resources or time, you can't necessarily commit that. I would say, depending on that product or service or time, it could be anywhere from 10% to 50%, and it depends on how successful you are. And that success depends on so many different factors. One, who you're reaching out to. What's, little things like what's the title of your message? What's the body of your message? Because also you can't put too much information because you just want people to engage and to respond to you. So when people coming into our groups, when we would say, hey, go check out this piece of information or something like this, we found we actually got more success when we responded to them and said, hey, what's your interest in corporate wellness, and why don't you give me your phone number? So sometimes you really have to simplify it. And I think that LinkedIn isn't a replacement for personal meetings, and you still have to, pick up the phone and call people or meet them in person. But it's great for that initial dialogue. And I think LinkedIn is great from a thought leadership perspective. It's been amazing for us for webcasts and white papers. So we do like 100 webcasts and white papers per year. And when we do webcasts, it's video. So we have a presentation, and then we have video. So we don't do webinars anymore because I think people get bored. They want to see someone. And if you're educating people on that webcast or white paper, focus on, I'm not going to sell them on my 401k product. What I'm going to do, and this is the approach we do, is I'm going to focus on a case study, successful case study. So to give you one example, with our the gift cards example of the webcast we did an educational webcast, and we pushed it out to our email, through social media. But the organization we worked with to develop that, they had worked with the SHRM to push something out, and they spent really a lot of money on SHRM, and they got like 40 people on their webcast. And when we talked to the company, it was, we want to teach all our members something. We don't want to sell our members anything. If you want to sell our association members or our audience, we don't necessarily, what I mean by sell is just not teach them anything. So what we did is we got 2 large employers who did a case study on what they're using to incentivize their employees in gift cards. It was Sprint Nextel, the director of benefits, and Hillshire, the foods company. And we got almost 1,000 people on that webcast. And I think that's the power of the social media side, is saying, how can I really provide a tremendous amount of value to people, where afterwards they'll say, hey, who put that all together? And they're really a expert and that thought leader that I should engage with. And I think the case studies is this is what our conference is about, is you'll see getting these national employers or these people doing amazing things to share their case studies. Because people need to know what works, what doesn't work, what are best practices, how can I skip ahead? And I think if you focus on those case studies where you get your clients to tell your story for you of what they're doing that has really worked and provided value, you'll move up much, much faster.
Great. Any other questions?
If you step back and you say, it's not about them selling your company, because find your clients that they love you and what you've done has really worked for them. And you basically ask them the value that they've gotten out of working with you, and say, would you like to share that story? Because what we'd like to do is make a greater impact. For example, if it's let's say it's corporate wellness. I would approach that employer and say, as an industry, we need to collaborate and work together and share the case studies. And all the employers have said this. They want to share. They want to know what works and what doesn't. And would you share your story? Because if you do, it can make a big impact on other organizations about how they do business, and it's a great way to collaborate and network. And if it was, for example, a different industry like voluntary benefits, it could be an employer doing something that's really great at how they're engaging employees and getting them to enroll in their benefits. And so you could approach them and say, what you're doing, is in the top 1% of the industry. And would you share your story? Because we all know, there's employees who they get disabled on the job or off the job, and now they can't pay the mortgage, or they can't put food on the table. But what you've done is been able to really educate your members, unlike other companies, in really the value of it. And we really like you to share that story. And I think once you start, understanding what that approach is, I think you'll find them very willing to, because we've had a lot of success. And then what ends up happening is, as other of your clients see some of your clients sharing stories, then they want to share their stories too. And it kind of takes off on its own.
I think that's a great point. You obviously want your customer to be an advocate for you, but it's also putting them in a great light as a thought leader, or maybe somebody that is taking the initiative into a new way of doing business. But now all of a sudden, they're getting their name out there, but you're also getting the benefit of that, because now you're sharing that out there with your prospects.
And they might be nervous about it, and you kind of have to work them through that. So that even happens here at our conference, where you ask them to share, and I'm doing one where it's the presenter hasn't spoken, but I know they're going to be great. I know they're going to deliver a great story. And you just have to, build that comfort level on them wanting to share that story.
And being nervous is typical with any business. I mean, I work with mutual insurance companies. Mutual insurance companies are the last to market with new products. They are the last to do something new. Well, I got one of them to share their business case with me. And now the other 3 major mutual insurance companies, once this hit the market, contacted me and said, we need to do this. Let's do it at scale. Unfortunately, not all 3 of those are my prospects, but it's something that you start to see a ripple effect.
I also think that, if you hadn't had a chance, you should really take the opportunity to pounce on this man and capture him somewhere in the hall if you have any questions. Because, what's unique about Chris too is he comes from the insurance industry. So just like me, he dealt with how he had to develop prospects and develop business, but now he's on the other side of the table. And I think, that you've got one of the top experts here from, how you actually prospect and reach out to people with the best practices, and, how you build your profile too. And it's not an opportunity you get every day.
Well, thank you very much.
So I really appreciate you coming out, and hopefully we'll have him coming each year, and maybe we'll actually do some case studies too. We'll get Chris to bring some of his clients that it's really worked on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate everyone taking their time today.
Thank you so much.